To buy endlessly, we need to throw out endlessly. And this requires a highly effective waste system. In fact, capitalism depends on this slick removal of our unwanted goods. In the West, time and space are often worth more than commodities, leading to a culture of throw away and buy again, rather than repair and reuse. Imagine if we could never throw anything away. We'd slowly be ousted from our homes by our purchases as we pile up one delivery box upon another. I'm keenly aware of this problem, and even I'm shocked to see how many soft toys my children can surreptitiously accumulate over the years. Though I must say they make great use of the cardboard boxes. As a visual artist, we make things, so we're certainly part of this problem. The artist Michael Landy created an installation called Art Bin, where he invited artists to throw away their unwanted and unloved artworks. I can tell you as a sculptor that storage is one of my biggest headaches. Over 20 years ago, already perturbed by this problem, I created an installation called Transparent Room, which conceptually removed the gallery. I filmed the views through the walls and ceiling of the galleries and replayed these within the space. These films were enlarged and sped up over time until the images became entirely abstract. Rather than exhibit objects in the gallery, my work invited the viewer to look around and appreciate the everyday spaces which surround them. More recently, I've begun to explore how people dump illegally their unwanted goods. I've worked with divers to recover bicycles, shopping trolleys, and other detritus from canals across Europe. I take these objects and I record the sounds they make to create a composition which plays alongside the objects standing illuminated on the surface of the water. Just like the municipal waste system, throwing things in the canal makes them invisible. Imagine if at the end of every street you had to watch your waste accumulate for the period of, let's say, a month before it's removed. Would you think a little bit more about what you bought and what you threw away? I take these objects and I make them visible again to demonstrate that they don't just simply disappear when we let go of them. Since the age of imperialism and the Industrial Revolution, consumption has risen exponentially in the West, leading to catastrophic climate change and rising sea levels. I wanted to show people in London how this would impact on their city by simply marking a line where the sea level would be in 1,000 years. My first thoughts were to draw this blue line across the cityscape, but on reflection, I realized I could make just as powerful a statement by borrowing existing monuments to make parasitical artworks. This repurposing of public sculpture was not only just efficient from a practical point of view, but questioned the whole legacy of these icons. To pay for the Grand Old Duke of York monument seen here, every single British soldier had to forego a day's wages. Needless to say, no matter how high the sea level rises, this old man will always be safe. Not the same can be said for some of the poorest countries and fragile ecologies in the world. I was lucky enough to be invited to make a new commission in Norway to be studied by a group of environmental psychologists to ascertain whether art could indeed change people's perceptions of climate change. Coming from London, I was struck by the contrast between the pristine Norwegian air and the polluted air of my home city. And this made me reflect on how countries like Norway have benefited so hugely from global commerce. They've exported vast quantities of oil, and on that basis can now import goods from around the world without suffering any of the negative consequences associated with the production of these goods. It's all too easy to blame countries like China on their large carbon footprint and their polluting industries, when we have outsourced nearly all of our production. Children in China breathe toxic air, so children here can play with toys that are far too cheap. This made me think about air itself. It's so intangible, it's so omnipresent, and yet nothing is more fundamental for sustaining our lives. I wanted to use air as an artistic material, and to these ends, I started to recreate air from locations around the world. The pristine Norwegian air, and by contrast, the polluted air of London, São Paulo, Beijing, and possibly the most polluted in the world, New Delhi. With the help of the fragrance house IFF, I worked with perfumers who lived in these places to accurately recreate the smells, humidity, temperature, and visibility of these locations. Critical to the success of this project was the stark contrast between the atmospheres within each dome. We all tend to habituate to our living conditions and become slowly desensitized to our environments. However, within the pollution pods, you could travel from one continent to another in just a few seconds, leaving no time to acclimatize to the new environments. The Norwegians' reaction to my installation was visceral. They simply could not believe anyone could live in air as polluted as New Delhi's. Just this year, I was invited by Sky Arts to create a new public sculpture for their series called Landmark. It's a sort of bake-off for artists. I decided not to make a permanent sculpture. Surely we shouldn't even be thinking about permanence when our whole future is in such jeopardy. Instead, I chose to make a temporary and mobile artwork which reduced the amount of carbon released into the environment. A climate positive sculpture. My choice of materials keeps the carbon locked in. The framework is constructed from a single English oak tree, and many of the elements used in the sculpture are modular, allowing them to be easily reused and repurposed, such as these boxes designed by Studio Bark, for which I built the seating and supported the oak saplings, which I plant in situ after every show. Each of these trees, when mature, can sequester up to a ton of carbon a year. Underneath the sculpture, the sphagnum moss carpet will become a peat bog, which can hold carbon for millennia. The only carbon-heavy material is the copper used to build the roof, and this has simply been pinned in place to allow it to be easily recycled when the sculpture is no longer needed. The inverted conical roof and supporting fins naturally exaggerate the sound of the weather, and perched on top of the sculpture is a small weather station which activates sound files which subtly augment the local weather conditions. So when it's drizzling, it sounds like it's raining. When it's raining, you hear rolling thunder in the distance. When it's breezy, it sounds like it's windy. For those within the sculpture, their experience of the weather is exaggerated, giving them the uncanny sense of what the weather will be like in the near future. Over the years, I've started to think of my art as a service, not a product. I'm interested in what we can share collectively, and for this reason, the public realm and the public museum are the focus of my work, not the private collector or the commercial gallery. I see my project swimming against the prevailing tide of neoliberal politics. Art can and should change people's lives and question the narrative that unfettered economic growth is the global panacea. With the festive season now upon us, and some of the best creative minds employed to seduce us with adverts, we need art now more than ever to make us pause and ask the question, do we really need this? Before we push that button, buy now.